They doubted I had the courage to follow through with what I did last Thursday. Western outlets labeled me just another African leader making baseless threats. Israeli intelligence brushed me off as an inexperienced officer trying to play the political game. Even among my own team, some murmured that I was pushing things too far, too fast. But they were all wrong. While they were busy misjudging me, I was tearing down their entire covert empire across Africa. What I'm about to share isn't just about what went down in Burkina Faso, it's a roadmap for how Africa reclaims its dignity. I'm Ibrahim Traoré, and this is the story of how I challenged Benjamin Netanyahu's African empire. Let me begin with what they hope you'll never hear. Over the last 15 years, while African heads of state were out signing agreements and posing for diplomatic photos, Netanyahu was orchestrating something entirely different, an intricate network of intelligence gathering, data mining enterprises, and digital surveillance programs spanning from Lagos to Nairobi. They assumed our poverty meant we wouldn't catch on, our desperation meant we'd stay silent, and our divisions meant we'd never unite. But I saw everything. What really set things in motion that Thursday? It happened 3 weeks earlier. My intelligence director handed me a folder. Inside were intercepted messages, financial documents, and satellite images that chilled me to the bone. These Israeli-linked companies weren't just setting up shop in Burkina Faso. They were mapping our mineral resources with surgical accuracy, eavesdropping on political discussions using compromised networks, and tracking our citizens using facial recognition tools we never approved. But the part that broke any hope of negotiation was this. They were funneling this intelligence to global corporations to give them the upper hand in deal-making with African governments. Our own data was weaponized against us. That night, I didn't sleep. I remained in my office until sunrise and made a decision that would shift the course of our future. At 5 a.m., I called in my military commanders. I said, Operation Clear Sight starts in 2 hours. No leaks, no hesitation.
This isn't just the story of a single decision, it's the turning point of an entire continent. One leader dared to do what the world believed was impossible. This wasn't simply an operation, it was a declaration, a voice saying loud and clear, our data, our decision. Watch closely, because what happens next could change Africa's destiny forever.
Hesitations, no forgiveness. By exactly 7 a.m., while most of Ouagadougou was still coming to life, our forces were already hitting 17 strategic locations. The first, a telecom office on the city's eastern side, looked ordinary enough: polished windows, company logo, staff walking in for another day. But this wasn't an ordinary company. Our troops entered unannounced. What they uncovered would dominate global headlines, though most news outlets never told the whole story. Server rooms filled with equipment capable of monitoring communications across half the continent. Drives packed with personal information on more than 2 million Burkinabe. Secure phones with direct links to Israeli intelligence. Piles of documents revealing just how deeply our security had been breached. And that was only the beginning. By 9 a.m., we had already dismantled 6 more Israeli-affiliated sites. These weren't regular offices. These were intelligence centers masked as tech startups, NGOs, and development orgs. In each case, the pattern was identical. Advanced surveillance gear, African citizen data prepped for offshore transfer, and systems that completely bypassed our national protections. The proof was undeniable, but I knew evidence wouldn't be enough. The world needed action. So at noon, I faced the cameras and delivered a message I had been preparing for months. Africa is no longer your experiment. We are not your subjects, and we are definitely not your blind spot. That declaration wasn't only for my people. It was aimed directly at Netanyahu, who was likely getting panicked updates from his operatives. Within 6 hours, the dominoes began falling across West Africa. Mali's president called me. Ibrahim, he said, we found similar networks in Bamako. What's the plan? Shut them all down, I said. Guinea's military leaders messaged me on secure lines. They had noticed strange Israeli movements, but feared causing diplomatic drama. I told them to forget diplomacy. That same evening, 3 neighboring nations suspended Israeli tech imports. 4 others launched emergency reviews of their infrastructure projects. And behind the scenes, the African Union began discussing a historic initiative, a united continental strategy to push back against foreign spying. But what truly rattled Netanyahu's administration wasn't just what we found or did. It was that Israel wasn't acting alone. Our investigation exposed ties between Israeli surveillance operations and intelligence agencies from France, the UK, and the US. Our own systems had been infiltrated not by a single entity, but by a coordinated alliance of foreign powers. That realization changed everything for me. I came to understand that this wasn't just about Israel crossing the line. It was about a colonial mindset that had never truly gone away, only evolved, now hiding behind technology instead of warships. The morning after our raids, an Israeli diplomat called, demanding to know what gave me the right to act. I answered him plainly, the authority of a sovereign nation refusing to be spied on. But the real conversation happened 2 days later. Netanyahu himself requested a private call. President Traoré, he began, there seems to be a misunderstanding about our work in your region. I answered calmly, the only misunderstanding was thinking we wouldn't catch you. He tried to defend Israel's role in Africa, saying they were providing jobs and infrastructure. I cut him off. When your infrastructure spies on the very people it's meant to help, that's not development. That's occupation in disguise. The call lasted 12 minutes. Netanyahu never called again, but his media machine responded like clockwork. Within hours, Israeli outlets accused me of destabilizing West Africa. European papers ran op-eds labeling me authoritarian. But the same journalists had never questioned how legal it was for foreign spies to operate freely on our soil. 5 years ago, such a media onslaught might have worked. But Africa has changed and they haven't noticed. Today's youth don't rely on foreign newspapers. They recognize the deception behind words like partnership when they're used to justify surveillance and exploitation. The night Operation Clearsight concluded. Thousands gathered near my office, not in protest and celebration. They carried signs that read, our data, our decision, and Africa is not for sale. University students held open lectures on digital sovereignty. Even those who had criticized me admitted the truth needed to come out. But the most surprising show of support came privately from African leaders. Presidents, generals, prime ministers. One by one, they began sharing their own evidence of suspicious foreign activity. What emerged was far bigger than us. It was an entire
As the operation unfolded, the world's mask began to slip. From Burkina Faso to Bamako and Guinea, a new wave of digital freedom was rising. For the first time, African leaders weren't negotiating out of weakness. They were demanding respect on their own terms. This wasn't just about exposing Israel's network. It was about ending a mindset that saw Africa as a pawn. A united Africa was stepping into the light, ready to reclaim control over its future.
Continent under silent siege. That's when it hit me. No single country could face this alone. We needed something new, an intelligence strategy designed by Africans for Africa. In the weeks that followed, I worked with 6 West African nations to build it. The result? We named it the Continental Digital Sovereignty Framework. Its foundation is simple, but groundbreaking. First, full transparency from all foreign investors in telecom and digital infrastructure. No exceptions. Second, every company operating in our data systems must accept full audits from African regulators. Third, zero tolerance for undeclared intelligence activities. If your operation can't prove a civilian purpose, you're shut down. Lastly, all African nations agree to share intelligence and act together. If one of us is compromised, all of us respond. But the rule that really upset Western powers? This one. African data must remain on the continent unless specifically approved otherwise. This isn't just about defense. It's about recognizing that data is power, and Africa's data should empower Africa, not be sold to the highest bidder. Netanyahu's administration called the framework naive and economically dangerous. They claimed Africa couldn't survive without their tech. They were wrong again. Just 3 weeks after implementing our sovereignty protocols, new partners arrived. China, Russia, India, even several European companies this time offering full transparency from day one. Turns out, you don't need to spy on your customers to do business. But what truly confirmed we were onto something? It came from a source I didn't expect. American intelligence agents, speaking privately with African diplomats, confessed they were reviewing their own data practices in Africa. Not because they wanted to, but because our framework was inspiring a global movement. When one continent starts demanding its digital rights, others follow. The ripple effect has been real. Morocco rolled out limits on foreign data mining. Kenya launched a full audit of global telecom contracts. Nigeria passed a law requiring all foreign companies to store user data within the country. Even South Africa, usually slow to challenge its Western ties, publicly declared that African networks must prioritize African interests. For the first time in recent memory, Africa is deciding the terms of digital engagement, no longer accepting whatever is handed down. But let's be clear, this isn't some anti-West, anti-Israel crusade. It's pro-African reality. We're open to any partnership built on respect and transparency, but we reject any relationship that hides behind secrecy and assumes African consent is automatic. Netanyahu's government had a choice. They could have asked. They chose to exploit. And now, they're living with that mistake. What's been even more fascinating is watching how the rest of the world is adapting to this new African stance. Chinese firms, despite their own criticisms of digital control, have willingly accepted our transparency rules. Russian companies, they've agreed to complete audits with zero resistance. Some European firms have even started using our framework as a badge of honor, marketing themselves as digital sovereignty compliant, just to stand out from competitors who still resist openness. Suddenly, companies that embrace honesty are gaining ground, while those hiding behind secrecy are losing access. It's exactly the shift we hoped for. Meanwhile, Israeli businesses that once operated with full freedom across our continent are now being blocked from more and more countries. Not because of hostility, but because they refuse to meet the standards the continent now demands. Netanyahu's Africa policy was built on the idea that African leaders would always trade away sovereignty for quick deals. That gamble is backfiring, but beyond business and politics, something even more powerful has changed: the mindset of African youth. Across campuses from Dakar to Nairobi, young people are now studying our sovereignty doctrine like gospel. They're holding forums, conferences, demanding laws that protect their digital identities. A generation is rising that no longer sees data as something technical, they see it as a question of dignity, and that shift will define Africa's place in the world for the next 50 years. 6 months after Operation Clearsight, I can tell you this: Burkina Faso's digital systems are more secure, more transparent, and better serving our people than ever before. Internet speeds are faster now that we've removed compromised networks and replaced them with honest partners. Telecom costs have dropped. Our citizens know that their personal data is no longer being traded like a product behind their backs. The biggest win isn't technological, it's moral. Our people know their government is standing between them and exploitation. The message for African leaders is simple. Digital independence is not only possible, it's profitable. But there's a message here for foreign governments too. The era of assuming African consent is over. This is no longer the continent that says yes out of fear or necessity. We don't accept deals just because we think we have no choice. Now, we choose. We measure every offer by one metric: mutual respect. If you can offer that, there's a seat at the table. If not, we're done. We've already chosen our direction: sovereignty over subservience, truth over convenience. An Africa that shapes its own digital future. Everything else? That's negotiable. Netanyahu had to learn that lesson the hard way, and he won't be the last. Other leaders will also come face to face with this new Africa. The only question left is this: how painful will the learning curve be? Because like it or not, they will learn. The digital colonization of Africa is coming to an end, and what replaces it depends entirely on whether the world is ready to face Africa as an equal. This is Ibrahim Traoré, and this is the story of how we took back our digital freedom.
After Operation Clearsight, it wasn't just servers that were shut down. It was an entire old order collapsing. Today, Africa's youth see digital identity as dignity, and companies now wear transparency as a badge of honor. This is bigger than one nation or one leader. It's a generation declaring sovereignty over subservience, truth over convenience. The question isn't if the world will change. The question is when it will accept this new Africa as an equal. This is the story of Africa's digital freedom.